give you coverage of this national shutdown. As you can see, those are visuals coming to you from Durban. We spoke earlier to our reporter Jade Pulser, who's been in conversation with the EFF's Marshal Dlamini, of course, raising some pertinent issues there about their march and how police have not allowed them to peacefully protest through the city of Durban. Of course, those visuals a little bit shaky there, but they are coming to us live from Durban. They were not allowed to go into Florida Road a little bit earlier on. And of course, Dlamini saying that this is a concern that they will raise with the commissioner a little bit later on. But let's take you to this conversation now. Police, through the National Joint Operational and Intelligence Structure, the NATJOINTS, say they have now arrested 87 protesters across the country for public violence-related offences. The arrests come as members of the EFF protest against social and economic challenges faced by South Africans, including crime, corruption, load shedding and unemployment, amongst others. NATJOINTS spokesperson Athlenda Mathe says of the 87 arrested, 41 were arrested in Gauteng, 29 in Northwest and 15 in the Free State. There are also arrests in other provinces such as Mpumalanga and the Eastern Cape. Godfrey Mulaudzi, a justice and violence prevention researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, joins me now. Godfrey, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, how would you describe the National Joint Operational and Intelligence Structure response to this shutdown? In fact, also President Cyril Ramaphosa's response. You know, we've seen more than 3,400 members of the South African National Defence Force, having been deployed in South Africa to support the police in securing law and order, particularly for this shutdown.
Good afternoon, Unati and the viewers. I think we spoke as well on the same matter during the July unrest. Look, I think the response by government, it's against the background of the July 21 unrest. Post that event, the 9-day long of looting and anarchy in the country, we had Professor Sandy Africa, who led the panel of expert commission in Durban that was looking at the July 21 unrest. And among other findings that she came up with was the question that was supposed, that she needed to look at was three things. One was whether the government response to the unrest was timely. Number two, if it was coordinated. Number three, if it was appropriate. And they found that none of those elements were present. And we could have seen how, the back and forth between senior government officials in how they differed, and as far as how they characterize the unrest as well, and also the lack of appetite on the security apparatus to deal with the unrest. So I think that the response by government at this point was informed by that, because one of the issues that came up was also, the state of preparedness on the part of government should we encounter this kind of incidents in the future. And when you come to this shutdown of today, you would have seen that there has been, in the intervening period linked to today, there's been statements that were made by the leaders of EFF, such as to the effect that we're going to make the July 21 unrest look like a Mickey Mouse, right? So these kind of statements make governments to be on alert in terms of providing security to the infrastructure and also to the people as well.
The EFF's Marshal Dlamini would disagree with you in as far as, just saying some of how this protest would have turned out, saying that it was rather disingenuous, for some quarters to compare this planned nationwide shutdown to what we saw, in July 2021, and as far as the unrests were concerned. And I was earlier speaking to Dr. Ntsikelela Breakfast, and he made an important point, also suggesting that perhaps, the level of response that we are seeing could also be as a result of maybe a security threat that was somehow intercepted by, those in power. Just talk to us about just some of the dynamics, because yes, the report that you've mentioned could possibly have been as a result of what we're currently seeing now, but it is rather unprecedented.
Well, look, the threat was there, because if leaders of political party make this kind of pronouncement that we're going to
I don't know if you saw, you spoke about, those small pockets of violence that we read about, and we saw one of them being the commercial explosives in Soweto that went off, or so we told. What do you make of such reports?
Look, I think that's what I'm saying, that, political leadership and as far as, we all equal, but political leadership, they need to be held to a certain high standard of accountability. So they need to be responsible in their pronouncement. When we have had in this intervening period towards the shutdown today, we have had a lot of back and forth between the two individuals you're speaking about, and, threats were made back and forth. So we could not really, I think we would have to just wait for the police to do their investigation and come up with exactly what transpired. But it could be there, it could either be not there, but because there was this kind of pronouncement, they also create an opportunity for other opportunistic tendencies to can creep in and steal the show. So also probably as a way of diversion as well. But I think that over and above, look, the conditions that really leads to the July 2021 unrest, pretty much they still prevail. Look at it, and I would go back again to this Professor in the Africa report. We are in a very highly polarized political environment, right, where we see political leaders issue statements such as they need to be shut down. Shutdowns on their own, I think that they are an act of repression, right, because you now are infringing upon my rights, who does not want to be part of the protest. So these are some of the pronouncements that were made in the build-up and so forth. So I think that when the state responds, they're acting based on all those available material in the position to avoid any possibilities of danger or loss of life. And the bombs and so forth, I think that we would have to leave this for now into the hands of the investigators, and probably we will speak well when we have credible information out of that.
Yeah, some organizations, particularly those in the fight against gender-based violence, have said that this particular response against the nationwide shutdown will set some form of precedent in as far as reaction is concerned, particularly when you start talking about our security cluster. And that is going to now be the expectation, where you deploy a number of officers on the ground to attach. In fact, let's hold on for this, Godfrey. Let's go now to the EFF president. He's currently addressing his members. Right, of course, Julius Malema addressing EFF members in Tshwane during this national shutdown. They are calling for an end to load shedding and, of course, the removal of President Cyril Ramaphosa. Let's now go back to our analyst and expert, Godfrey Mulaudzi, who has been with us this afternoon. Godfrey, thank you so much for your patience and joining us again. We'll probably go back to that statement, the statements being made by Malema in a short while. But one of the questions I was asking before we took that address was, just some organizations, particularly those that are fighting GBV, saying that the response that we've seen now by the National Joint Operational and Intelligence Structures for this particular shutdown will somehow, form a precedent for future kind of, crimes that we need to be sorted out in this country, and they might not stand up to it. So why then is this one a little bit different? I know that you've mentioned, certain reports that have shown gaps in the system and in the way in which the security cluster is done. And in fact, also the report by Sydney Mufamadi also exposed those gaps. So what then, from now, do they need to do, to make such responses better for the future?
Thanks, Mathe. I think so we avoid the similar uprisings, if I were to put it that way, for the lack of better words. So we need to look at conditions that give rise to these kind of incidences. The conditions that give rise to this to this shutdown today, the condition that gave rise to the then 2021 July. Now, one of them, as I was saying earlier, because our political landscape is very polarized, right? So that on its own is very risky. The socio-economic conditions, so the day-to-day living experience of our people is still pretty much dire. And these two conditions on their own are sufficient enough to create a very big storm in the nation, right? So you just need, some kind of opportunistic people or individuals to can take advantage of that, right? And create an uprising. Now, but I want to emphasize this point that because we live in a very, in a society that is governed by the rule of law, right? We speak for order, not anarchy. We need to always emphasize this point that government on its own cannot stop this anarchy. We're going to, as civilians as well, need to have an appetite to live in a peaceful society. So we do have the instruments are there, right? That we need to conduct ourselves peacefully because protest in their nature really is just to draw attention. And sometimes now and then it will happen through violence, right? But we need to say, let's do this within the prescripts of the law. Let's not also encroach on the rights of those who do not wish to do. Because when you say the complete shutdown today, small business people don't operate, right? You do not have that authority to stop people to go on by their own, day-to-day activities if they don't wish to be part of the process. And that is the problem that we need to. So the precedent that you're speaking about in this level, and I want to take it on this angle that you could imagine if tomorrow again DA come, and I'm sorry, and I want to apologize to DA if I'm just giving an example that if tomorrow DA then says we are also going to plan our shutdown, buses should not operate, day after tomorrow, Action SA do the same, we would be in a completely disorderly society. So I think that so we need to play our part as societies and uplift, uphold the rule of law, and but also our political leaders. But we shouldn't take away that this and also in electionary mode, right? We're going to the general elections next year, so we're going to have a lot of this kind of political party protests in the streets.
All right, Godfrey, let's pause that for now.